Welcome back to my new podcast called Friends in 3D. I am very thrilled to welcome my guest today, who is my dear friend. And actually, she is the only person out of all of my guests that you've heard so far that I actually met in person. It's a very precious thing. Her name is Rachel, and she's a wonderful photographer, a stereo photographer, a collector of photos, and also she does restoration of photos. I hope we can discuss it all today. Thank you so much for coming, and hello.
Thank you so much. What an amazing introduction. Can I live up to that? Thank you so much for having me.
It's really a great joy for me to chat with you today. Yeah, well, with all of my guests, I always start with the first question. Just if you could tell a couple of words about yourself, what you would like to share with us.
Yeah, well, my name is Rachel and I'm 34. I'm based in London and I'm an amateur photographer. That has to be underlined. I'm definitely still an amateur. I do both mono and stereoscopy work, which is something that I've been doing for about between 2 to 10 years, depending on what sort of art form I'm looking at. Yes. And in my spare time, I volunteer with animals. I spend a lot of time trying to get a cat happy for rehoming. So that's my main hobby at the moment.
Yes, it's so great, and I know that we share this love of for cats, and we have this community of cat people on Instagram who are just posting their cats.
It is quite a lot of cat people, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
You wouldn't really think that we would all have that in common, but we really do.
So with your photography, I just wanted to start with this because obviously you probably were already interested in taking pictures in photography. So how did you come to that, and what does it mean to you to take photos? And also I wanted to ask you about collecting photos, and also again, what does it give you? Yes, what kind of pleasure does it give you?
Well, let's see. So the buying half of things, I think, started around 12 years ago. I realised of my own family photographs that we didn't have anything that was older than, say, around 1920s, because my family couldn't afford it. And I didn't even have many of those. And I thought, well, I'd love to have something very old, Victorian or Edwardian. And I actually found, going onto things like eBay, that whole albums were being sold. So this is whole family albums. And it became a bit of an emotional thing for me, because the fact that these were no longer with their family. These people once meant something to somebody, and they had lives, they had, loved ones, and they are no longer owned by the people who love them. So I decided, as much as I could, and it didn't last very long, so I can't store half of them, but I bought quite a few albums just so they would have a loving home. And somebody who was interested in both the history half of things, the actual photography history, but also the social history. So I'd like to try and find out where they lived and what sort of the area looked like at the time. They sort of tied into me trying to also repair them. So I would scan them into Photoshop and I would try to repair them. I'm very much beginner at that as well, but it's something that I was interested in. And then trying to occasionally add in the colour. There's always a sort of difference of opinion regarding, should you put colour onto black and white? And I never think that it's something where black and white's not enough. It was more bringing them to life, to actually see them in sort of the way that we would recognise them from day to day. So I started doing that, and I was doing that with my own family photos as well, because these are family members that I never knew. So bringing them to life in that way as well. And so I went from basically just buying the cabinet cards and buying the albums to actual social photography and things that I really enjoyed. And then my own sort of beginning of taking photos was, I was housebound for a long time due to illness that made me very, very tired. I still have it, but it's not as bad as it was. And the only thing that I could do to go outside was to go in my garden. And I bought myself a camera, first time I actually owned a proper Nikon, you know, and I was really proud of it. I only had one lens for it, but I was really proud of it. And the only thing that I could really photograph was my garden. So I had insects, and I didn't have a macro camera or macro lens at that time. So I was shooting butterflies and things like that from quite far away. But, you know, it's the beginning of the idea. And then all my animals, the cats, and just trying to focus on that nature that was in my garden, and that was the only place I could go. So that's how I think, as my photography went on, I think it's why I focused on the nature so much, because that's where I began, and that's where initially for a long time that was my only place, and that was my only sanctuary, and it went on from there.
Well, that's really fascinating, and I think your story of collecting photos and bringing them to life, it's really something that I can relate to in a way. I never did it, but I worked in the archives, and I also had this work of reading the letters, the correspondence, and then finding something out about these people, and just again trying to restoring their lives, their stories, and you know, just trying to trace what happened to them. Of course, it's a historian's work, but it's also a very emotional work, because you feel very connected to them.
It is, and even if it's someone that you don't know, as you say, you're trying to keep them alive.
Yes.
And obviously with you, I mean, that's amazing to actually have a part of their history right there. And I think with my photos, it became a bit of a research work, because I didn't know who these people were half the time, and I would only have examples of things that are written on the back. I might be able to trace back where somebody is or who somebody was. I think then the vast majority, I never really found out who they were, and I could sort of trace the area that they were in. And every now and then, like for example, there's a photo that I love where they're outside a shop, so I could try and find where the business was. But I do think it's so important to try and preserve the past as much as we can.
Yes,
you know?
Yes. And actually, what you do there, that you colorize the pictures, it also reminded me. I don't know if you've seen this film. It's by Peter Jackson, where he actually restored the old footage of the First World War.
Yes.
And it's just and even though, you know, I love black and white, and I love black and white photography and black and white films, but with this, since it's these were just documentary reels, it feels like you are suddenly, you know, you're inside it, and all those colors. And of course it's completely heartbreaking, because it's a very sad movie. It's, you know, about all those young people perishing there, but it's something. I think it's one of the greatest impressions I had recently. Yes.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that really made a big impression on me as well. So I think with something as difficult as war, when we see it in black and white, I think we can allow ourselves to sort of shut off almost.
Yeah, like distance.
You know,
you
know, but if we acknowledge that this was not a long time ago, in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't. And to see that, as you say, the colorization, or at least like perfectly restored, we can realize how close we are to these human beings, and how really was not that long ago.
Yes. And well, speaking of the immersiveness, if I can say so, immersiveness of photography, I think it's for us, it's a very smooth transition to the topic of stereo photography. So if you could, well, we both are, of course, stereo enthusiasts, and I'm just explaining this, that we both belong to this stereoscopic community on Instagram. So I was wondering what your journey was. How did you come to that?
Well, it was quite an odd sort of roundabout thing, because I actually owned stereos, and I didn't realise I owned stereos, because I would buy not only albums but sort of photo bundles, and I would end up with some of these cards, and I thought, why are there two photos side by side?
That's amazing.
And I don't know why I didn't research it, but for some reason at that time I made the assumption it was some kind of thing that photographers did at the time. And I just didn't think about that. And I didn't have many of them, but I had them. And that was many years ago. And then in 2018, I lost my mum. And so much of her was a huge part of my life, because I was looking after her. My life was planned around being around my mum. And of course, she was also my friend, my best friend. And she would like to watch any sort of documentaries on Freddie Mercury, on anything to do with Queen. This was around the time that the actual film was released. They opened up a sort of a merchandise shop in London, and I happened to be there just walking past it. And it made me think of my mum, and it just sort of, I wanted to be in there just to feel my mum's presence. So I went inside, and just on the right-hand side was sort of a display of merchandise, and they had a book, which was a Queen in 3D book. And I thought, what has that got to do with Queen? I just didn't, I did not know why that was there. And they had this little thing called the Owl, which of course we know as a viewer to view these with, but at the time it was this odd thing with two lenses, and I just didn't understand what it was. When I actually read everything on the book and on the Owl packaging, I thought, oh my God, that's what my cards are. And I realized that I own these 3D cards, and I thought, I cannot believe this was actually made in the Victorian era. And I bought the book, and I bought the Owl, and I went home, and I spent about half an hour trying to view the book. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to get this. This is never going to work. But then suddenly my eyes just finally settled while using the light Owl that comes with the book. I think I actually verbalized, oh my God, because just seeing it blend in front of my eyes, I later realized that you never lose that wow moment. You never lose that. But I'll never forget my first moment of that. And the way I say it's roundabout was the fact that I had them for so many years and didn't actually realize, but they sort of came into my life when I needed them, which was a funny sort of way of it happening. And it just one of those things. If I hadn't entered that shop that day,
wow,
and there it was.
Wow, that's such a great story. I knew that Bohemian Rhapsody was one of the factors, that inspired you to look at this, but I didn't know this story about the shop. It's amazing, and how everything is tied together. Your own story, your family, your mom, your music, and the stereos that you had that you didn't know that you had. I really love it. So at what point you bought this book, you were fascinated with this, but at what point you started taking your own stereos? When did you decide to try it out?
At first, I thought that it couldn't be done. I thought, well, this must be a Victorian thing. They must have had the cameras. Surely I can't do this myself. But looking at the LSC, the Non-Stereoscopic Company's website, and seeing tutorials and saying, I can actually do this myself. And then I can't remember exactly how I ended up on there, but I went on Instagram. I think I was already there, but I hardly posted, and I think I did a search, and of course everyone appeared, everyone that I now know and love, and I just saw so many people doing this and taking their own photos, and when I worked out how, I will tentatively put my things online, and of course in my first 20 odds were terrible, but no one ever said to me, oh, this is awful. They helped me learn what I was doing wrong, and I slowly learned. I'm awful at science. I am not that type of mind. So anyone describing something to me or explaining something to me has to really dumb it down, but they had so much patience with me. I was really taken by everyone there and the atmosphere there. I slowly learned how to do it.
Yes. Well, I think it's really one of the great things for me as well, you know, as a beginner in stereoscopy, that people were always so accepting. And actually, yes, that's what you mentioned, that no one ever told me your stereos are terrible. They have no depth and so on. But because that's true, you know, my first stereos they were not.
Oh, mine were awful. Mine were terrible.
So, but yeah, people were actually explaining sometimes, you know, you should try this, try that, and how to do it. That's something that I really value, and I think it's something that I love about our community. That the majority of people, they are very nice, and
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you do feel like it's not too hard for somebody new to come in, and I honestly hope that people still feel that way, because I've been there for nearly 3 years now, I believe, and I'd like to think that it's still got that atmosphere, that if there is somebody new, that they can join us and we will help. And I'd love to meet more people. Get more people in.
Yes, absolutely. So for you as a photographer, do you feel like there is any difference between monophotography and stereo photography for you, just to channel, you know, your own vision, your own creativity?
I sort of go in the middle of it, because there are people who are far better than I am at finding something that is amazing in 3D, the angles especially, that some people get. And there's often two schools of thoughts. Some people think that you take a photo and it's either going to be good in 3D and only in 3D, because you get quite a boring mono, and then you put it in 3D and it's incredible. Or you take a 3D photo and it's good in sort of mono or stereo. I'd like to think that there are some that I have that are good as mono on their own, but there are some that are definitely quite dull to look at in the mono sense, but put them in 3D, and I hope they're an interesting way to do it. And it's still something that I am trying to hone. That sort of eye for 3D is something that I think I've still not really honed. It is trying to find things that you see from your day-to-day life. So if you think, okay, that thing is actually coming right towards me, then that will make an amazing photograph. But you do have to train your head to that, because you're not really, if you have an experience as a mono photographer, you're not always thinking in the sense of what can leap out at you. And it's quite hard to train your brain to that. I'm at least train my brain to that. I don't know about you.
Yes. So it's the same for me. I think I've been taking stereos for about 3 years and a half, and I think that only in the last year, maybe year and a half, I think when the pandemic started, I started, you know, taking really lots and lots of stereos, just walking around.
Me too.
And I started actually seeing which objects would look good in stereos, and sometimes I pass a leaf on the ground. I almost feel like it's calling to me, you know, take a stereo, because it will look great. It doesn't always work, and I actually discard lots of things that I take. I post very, very few of them.
There are many different levels of learning, aren't there? And I think we're always learning. I mean, you are the master of the puddle. You are amazing at the puddles, and I've always found that very inspiring too. So I will also look at puddles now, and you're great at leaves as well. You know, the fact, as you say, that there's a leaf on the pavement, and you wouldn't think that's an interesting photo to take, but you sort of managed to get it to leap off the pavement at you, and that's what I love about your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I really think that you have this amazing eye for lighting, and I really love how you take photos of these flowers, and also of
thank
leaves,
you very much.
and of insects, all those mammals.
Oh yes.
So we talked about a little bit about your journey with Queen and about your journey with stereoscopy, but I was wondering how connected these two aspects of your life are. Yes, because we know that for many of us on our Instagram community, these two things are very, very tight, very connected. So what are your thoughts about it?
I think for me, I found out more about Queen coming onto Instagram, and I thought that I knew a lot of hits, a lot of music. I found out that there's so much that I don't know, and I found it so wonderful to discover both 3D and more Queen. But I think the thing is that even if you don't come to Instagram solely via Queen, I think because there's such a huge influence there, because everything that Brian May puts into the community, the influences, the knowledge that he works so unbelievably hard to bring the knowledge of 3D to the masses, and also give so much support to so many people who are still learning and still trying hard to get it. And I think because his influence is so big and his presence is so big that it's hard to separate those two things on Instagram. And I think even if someone's not a Queen fan, they can still completely acknowledge that he's a big guy to us. And I think we have a lot to thank him for.
Yes. Well, for me personally, I certainly came to stereoscopy through him and through Queen and 3D and through his tutorials on YouTube. But also because for me it was a very natural thing of being a fan of his solo music and of his of Queen music to try to follow what he does, and I thought that stereoscopy was something so fascinating, and something that it turned out that I could actually do it, because in the first place I was absolutely sure that I wouldn't be able to do it.
Oh, me too.
Yeah,
me too. I thought
yeah, I thought it's some kind of a super skill, superpower that like it's completely inaccessible. But I think that he is doing such a great work, just convincing people how fun it is, and that he's not like our guru, but he's just one of us. Yes, and he just has more experience in this, but in all other aspects, he is just one of us.
Absolutely. I mean, there is like an element like he is like a teacher, but he's also got that enthusiasm that he's never lost, and that he's had since he was a child. So there's not the air of I know more than you. It's more like I want to share this with you, and that's what makes it feel so great. And I think that's what we can all share.
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
So I sort of delved into 3D and the whole Queen world and their music, and at the same time. So it is connected for me, but my photography came first. But it's still been an absolute joy to listen to all their music and all their solo work as well. And it's been a wonderful thing. And it's been something also that's helped me along as well, because both taking photographs and have new things to listen to that I love helped me deal with the loss of my mum. I think when a lot of the songs also spoke to me, even if they weren't even actually about loss, they would just speak to me. It's just something, as we said before, was there at the right time.
Yes. Well, for me, music is very emotional. That's the art that affects me most of all, more than anything else. And I always feel this connection.
I think there's always going to be a song that we can turn to, as you say, the varying emotions that we have. We have a happy song when we're happy and a sad also, and we start associating those songs with times in our lives, and also the feelings that we feel. And I also feel the same with the photos that I take. I think you might not even actually mean to, but you can probably project some of your emotions into what you take. So I think all all the art forms that we have on Instagram, as well as wonderful artists that we have, then there is a sort of a shared emotion in there.
I also find it fascinating, and especially when I talk to artists who are also stereo photographers, and I can see lots of things that are like their art is affecting their photography, and their photography is affecting their art. It's so interesting to observe it, and it's I'm not an artist, so I don't know how it's but
I can't draw to save my life. But yes.
No, for me it's like I'm really amazed by this.
Me too. Me too. It's wonderful stuff.
Yeah. So for me, when I've rediscovered Queen about 4 years ago, of course I knew Queen and I listened to it. Everyone knows Queen. So, but I knew mostly their hits and a couple of albums, actually from the later period, from the 80s. But so for me, the greatest discovery when I started, when I delved into their catalog was their 70s album. Yeah, so I really became a fan of their 70s albums. How about you? What was it for you? Because I assume you also mostly knew their hits a bit before.
Yeah. I just didn't know, as you say. I think I knew some of the songs without truly realizing, but the 70s era, as you say, was a revelation for me. And not only the albums, but watching some of the gigs like Live at the Rainbow. It's not the Queen that I know, that I was raised with. The image that most of us have of my age group is a sort of Live Aid era Queen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we've all seen the long hair era, but we don't really associate it too much with them. There's just something, because they were so young and so new, something so raw about it, and so different to some of them than their later things. And it's definitely my favorite era.
Yes, I think I was really amazed by how theatrical they were, and they were theatrical afterwards, but in this era I think it was so special. It's
sort of faux. It's so full of fantasy and magic. It's real. There's elements of surrealism, and it's just like a separate little world that you can sort of make yourself a part of for a moment listening to the albums. And I mean I'm not too well versed in the music of the time, but I can't think of another band that does that.
Yes, and I think that's I really love this connection between their music and poetry of that time and the British English tradition of fantasy, fantasy books, like Tolkien, of course. Yes, and I'm a big fan of British culture, so I love it. It's like another, confirmation that everything is kind of connected, and it's amazing. It's such a thrill.
I think it was also quite rebellious thing to do, because at the time, to be flamboyant and to wear makeup was very much frowned upon, and quite dangerous in some. I can imagine if you walk through the roads of London like that, quite dangerous at the time. But they didn't care. They did what they absolutely wanted to do, and they marketed themselves as they wanted to, to appear like, to look like, to act like. And I really admire that. They were just entirely themselves.
Yes, I also admire this. And of course, today is September the 5th. It's Freddie's birthday, and I was actually thinking of him, and every time I think of him, I think of how brave he was. Yes, and how fearless he was to break all those barriers, to challenge all those rules and society rules, and not to be afraid of it, or at least not to show his fear. I don't know, maybe inside it was a bit scary, but he never showed it. He always felt, looked so confident. And
absolutely, no, he was, from our perspective, sort of seeing him from the outside, he was absolutely himself. And I'm sure there were some sort of moments for him where he was quite even scared, perhaps, but he did it, and that's something that I admire a huge amount. And he just did not mind what anybody else thought. He was going to go out there and do what he wanted and be who he wanted to be.
Yes.
And I wish I had that confidence. I wish I had that, you know.
Yeah, me too.
But he's an amazing man.
Yeah, yeah. One more question. What does it mean to you to be a fan of a rock band, of Queen, of Brian? How does it, what does it mean to you, again, in terms of your creativity, in terms of your relationship with music, or how it's, well, we already talked a little bit how it's affecting your photography, but how would you sum it up?
I think it's like being a fan of anybody is like having an old friend with you through your life, and it's something that you can always go back to, something that you can always rely on. You feel their emotions and you take them on board, and it's the sharing of art like that is something that's so meaningful. And as I said before, you can associate it with a time or a place but you can also take it through life, and suddenly things will get new meanings for you as you experience things. But in terms of sort of a more like practical way, I also find that being a fan in the social media era, I think we do have responsibility, because when somebody, and I mean this means any fan base I've been a part of, when somebody finds an artist, then they'll want to find other people to talk to and share it with, so they'll join a fan base. So the fan is almost like the first thing that somebody finds when they find a new artist. If they find that the fan base is not friendly or is not welcoming, then that might put them off the artists themselves, because they associate songs with negative things. So I think that being a fan of anything these days, you do have responsibility to try and be as nice and as welcoming as you can be, if you choose to be a part of a fan base. Then I think it's very important that we can all enjoy what there is, and we can all share our thoughts on something and our feelings on something, and sing along to things and join, you know, go to the venue and have a good time, hopefully one day, rather than worry about being able to fit in, or worry about the fact that you haven't been a fan for very long or something like that. And I think that's why these days being a fan is a loaded word. It's a loaded thing.
I think it's a very interesting idea that you brought in, because I thought about our stereoscopic community in these terms, that we all have responsibility to, you know, be welcoming to new people. But this thing that you mentioned, I think it's also very important. And yes, that's something that I've been a part of, also different fan bases. And it's always, when you become a fan of someone or something, you really want to share this. And when, you know, this community you are joining is not friendly, you feel like you feel very hurt, and you don't want to be a cause of this, you know, that the person would be just put off, and you know,
because you know, I mean, the more that people behave that way, the more that the artists themselves will end up suffering, because if everybody will join in and then end up leaving because nobody wants to be around the fan base, you know. So, but I overall, in all the things that I've been a part of, I am happy to say that it's been, you know, a nice experience, and it's been a good thing. And I am happy that, you know, in the Instagram world that we're a part of, in every different sphere of it, I think overall we make an effort to try and be friendly, and it's always something that I've loved about what we're a part of.
Yes, yes. I think it's a great way to, you know, finish our conversation with, you know, that we all have this. Let's all be friendly. Let's all be kind to each other, especially now, you know, that the times are not the best, and you know, just taking the best out of it. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you that you know, found this time and effort, and thank you for joining me and for sharing your thoughts. It's been a great pleasure. If you are listening on Spotify, by. You can also see Rachel's photos on Instagram. Her handle is Curator. And,
that's the one.
Yes. Sorry if I mispronounce it.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely fine. Perfect.
Yes. So, and please, if you liked it, please tune in for the next episode, and please share it with your friends. Thank you so much again, Rachel, and see you around.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.